Welcome, friends, to a new series of At Home with Theosophy. In this series, we have been exploring some basic subjects or some foundational subjects of the Theosophical teachings. And in this particular series, we are going to go a little more into some more technical and philosophical aspects of the teaching. The book we are going to use for our class is Deity, Kosmos and Man, written by Geoffrey Farthing. He was a past president of the Theosophical Society in England, and he's also the co-founder of the Blavatsky Trust. The Blavatsky Trust is located in Europe, in the UK, and they organize every year the Theosophical, the European School of Theosophy. And Geoffrey Farthing was a student of Blavatsky's, of Madame Blavatsky's teachings. So this is a way to get familiar, to begin to get more familiar with Blavatsky's approach. We are planning on developing maybe in the fall a class on the Secret Doctrine, so this may serve as an introduction to these kind of concepts. As usual, we are going to go through the different excerpts that I have chosen from the book. Of course, we don't have time to go through every chapter and every concept, so if you like the ideas presented here, you can get the book and go further into this. But we are going to go into these concepts that I have selected, and if you have any questions or comments, you can either write in the chat box that you have there, or you can, if you have a microphone in your computer, you can raise your hand by pressing the icon that you have there, and then I will give you the microphone and we can talk. So let us begin. The chapter that I chose to begin with is called the Hierarchies of Beings. And this is part of something that is important in the Theosophical view, especially when we talk about how the cosmos is developed and how it is regulated by different laws. As we are going to see, although in science we talk about laws as being mechanical, blind forces, in the Theosophical view, these laws have far more dimensions that we know in science. So let us start with some foundational concepts that will present the structure on which we are going to build the different ideas we are going to explore. So Geoffrey Farthing says, occult science lays before the student certain facts of nature which are unknown to the science of today. Until a person develops within himself the faculties necessary to corroborate the teachings, he may take these facts as hypotheses. This is an important point because although Blavatsky and other Theosophical teachers have written quite extensively about these concepts, their intention was never to produce a dogma or a doctrine that had to be believed. Of course, as we are going to see, this is something that has that these concepts we are going to share are far beyond the perception that we may have at the moment. So they must be taken as he says, a hypothesis, so that we can try to see how life looks when we try to interpret it from this point of view. We all have a certain hypothesis, let's say, in mind, whether there is life after death or not. That is some view that we have that we really don't know to what extent that may be true or not. Now, we may have a materialistic view of life, or we may take a theosophical view of life. And we can experiment and see which one is it's the view that allow us to live more meaningfully. Then Ed is asking, when was this written? I don't know when the first edition was written. He passed away not too long ago, and he was a modern person. So I don't know the first edition. I can find out and then I'll let you know. So he will, throughout the text, he will quote or rephrase many of the teachings of Blavatsky. He says, esoteric science shows that life is universal, and quotes, every atom of substance, no matter of what plane, is in itself alive. And where there is life, there is consciousness. Everything in the universe, throughout all its kingdoms, is conscious. That is, endowed with a consciousness of its own kind and on its own plane of perception. So this is the basis from which we are going to build this view, as I was saying. The idea is that everything has some degree of life. In the Theosophical view, there is nothing that is completely inert. And actually, from the scientific point of view, this is also true. The idea of inert matter is actually dated. It comes from when science thought that the atoms were little like billiard balls that were solid, made of these pure elements, a little ball of gold, a little ball of silver, a little ball of carbon, and that they were the foundation of matter. Now we know that matter is actually energy, is constantly in motion, and we could say alive. But not only that, in the Theosophical view, anything that is alive has some kind of consciousness. Of course, when we talk about consciousness, we don't mean the mental consciousness that we know in human beings. I think we could take the idea of consciousness as the ability to respond to the environment. You know, when we are unconscious on the physical plane, if we faint, we cannot respond to the environment. So whatever is conscious is whatever can respond to what is out there. And certainly from atoms to planets, everything responds to the environment. So that is like an abstract, basic idea of consciousness. Then that consciousness takes different qualities depending on what kind of organism is manifesting that consciousness. So when we say everything, including, let's say, rocks, are conscious, we are not saying that the rocks think like a human being does, but there is some kind of life there, there is some kind of energy, and therefore also there is some kind of consciousness. The human body presents a miniature model of the hierarchical structure of the cosmos. The chemical atoms and molecules that constitute the material of cells are living structures. A high degree of organization is present in the living cells, which contribute to the formation of tissues, bones, and organs, the next hierarchical level, until we come to the functioning whole, the body itself. So he's setting here the idea of a hierarchy of organization. This is not new to Theosophy. Actually, Blavatsky mentions a Western philosopher / scientist or mathematician, Leibniz. Leibniz talked about life in this hierarchical way. He would talk about monads as these centers of consciousness, which are very simple in what we call inorganic matter. But when that matter associates itself in something more complex, then there is a kind of wider or more embracing monad that is animating that form that is more complex. So, for example, the atoms are some kind of monads, then the molecule has a different kind of monad that is higher in this hierarchical view. And then you can go on building on more and more complex forms. And the concept itself is interesting because we human beings are the sum of all the different consciousnesses that are in our body. We tend to think that we are a single consciousness. But if you see how Blavatsky describes the human being, for example, she says we are this conjunction of different consciousness. Therefore, when we have a feeling, when we have a sensation, when we have a thought, that thought, feeling, or sensation is the result of the interaction of all the different consciousnesses that are in our body. In the scientific view, we talk about hormones and how they affect our moods or the neurotransmitters. This is a different way of putting the same concept. Many times it is according to how the body is working is the kind of consciousness or feeling or emotion that we are experiencing. Because our consciousness, as I was saying, is the result of the sum of all these consciousnesses. So in a similar way, what the Theosophical view proposes is that the idea is that this universe is itself a being, as we are going to see. And that being is expressed on each level of consciousness. So let's go on and see that. Each unit, from the chemical atom, the cell, the organ, to the body, has its individual consciousness, while at the same time functioning within the consciousness of a larger unit within the hierarchical structure. Each unit is in communication with the rest of the system, of which it is a part, transmitting and receiving messages in a manner which, in our own human activities, we would describe as intelligent. So try to picture the kind of situation that he's describing. It is not too different to the ancient idea of the planet as being a being, like Gaia, for example. We all are cells of this entity that is the planetary spirit. And all our activities are influencing how the planet is, what the planet goes through, how the planet lives. So there is this kind of collective consciousness and individual consciousness always working together. This view will be important when considering celestial beings. So this is why he's elaborating on this idea. And there is a level of intelligence everywhere, even in bacteria. Of course, bacteria don't have a brain, but they have an intelligence that allows them to go here or there to perform many very complex chemical and biochemical reactions. So that is a kind of intelligence, not a mental intelligence, again, but some kind of organizational power. And he says the physical body, however, is only one aspect of the sevenfold man. Remember, in some other series we have explored the constitution of human beings. So in the Theosophical view, there are 7 different aspects that constitute what we are. And he says, whose inner aspects repeat the hierarchical pattern reflecting the structure of the cosmos. So here is the idea that the human being is like a miniature of the universe. In some way, the whole universe is reflected in a human being, and the human being is a mirror of the universe, and we are going to see that. He says, each plane of the sevenfold universe is peopled by lives, as varied in their degree of consciousness and the functions they fulfill, as are the hierarchies of lesser lives in the body of man. And he quotes from Blavatsky, the whole cosmos is guided, controlled, and animated by almost endless series of hierarchies of sentient beings, each having a mission to perform. They vary infinitely in their respective degrees of consciousness and intelligence. So in the same way that in our body there are living beings, the cells and the bacteria, and even the molecules and the atoms that, as we have seen, have some degree of life and consciousness, in the same way, the cosmos itself is filled by this, by different forms of life. And it is important to note here that this idea of the cosmos being filled by lives is actually reflected in many other ways in nature. For example, in the past, medicine thought that our illnesses were a mechanical defect, just like, you know, a cart would break down because the parts were not working and this was just a mechanical failure. They thought that any illness was a mechanical failure. And they could see that these illnesses would follow some laws, some stages that are repeatable, that they repeat with each other or in different individuals. So they thought that there were some laws for illnesses, just as there are laws for gravity, for example. We think that gravity is something that is just mechanical, it's a mechanical force, and that always happens the same way. They thought that the illnesses also were mechanical laws. Now, when they discovered bacteria, they realized that it was not something mechanical, that it was a process mediated by lives and by intelligence and by a whole interaction, very active and living interaction of different kinds of entities. And yet, the illness goes on following certain patterns. So in the same way, what Theosophy is putting forth for our consideration, the Theosophical teachings, is that what we call laws in nature, even though they may seem mechanical, they are mediated by different entities with different kinds of consciousness. So in the same way that, you know, the honey is produced by bees that are alive and that we know that is mediated by lives because we can see the bees, but if we didn't, we could think that in the beehive there is this mechanical process of honey being produced. In a similar way, these laws of nature are also mediated by certain kinds of lives which are invisible to our regular eyes. So this view begins to show the cosmos as a living organism and not a mechanical machine. Science little by little is changing that paradigm. You know, the paradigm that started with science was that the cosmos was this clock, this big clock that worked mechanically. Therefore, there is no room for a spiritual intelligence or a god or whatever can bring some creativity, because the clock is just mechanical. Now, little by little, we are seeing in science that this doesn't quite work that way, and the idea of consciousness begins to permeate. So he goes on and says the definition of the word hierarchy is curiously indicative of the occult teaching. The Oxford Dictionary gives the etymology of the word. From the Greek, it comes from the Greek hieros, meaning sacred, and archein, meaning to rule. It then defines the hierarchy as the collective body of angels grouped in 3 divisions and 9 orders of different powers and glory. So this is the typical Christian view of the hierarchy of celestial beings in different orders of angels. But the idea of a hierarchy then is some sacred rulers. So he says all these beings that together constitute the planes of nature are themselves individually and their hierarchies collectively subjected to the evolutionary process. Before the human stage is reached, they are irresponsible agents of the law which operates throughout the universe. They are termed elementals and are associated with the mineral plant and the animal with the mineral plant and animal kingdoms, as well as constituting 3 pre-mineral kingdoms. Beyond the human stage are hierarchies of still higher consciousness. A logos, as a collective being, is the life of the whole grand scheme. So here he begins to introduce this idea of the different kind of entities that constitute this hierarchy of celestial beings. In Theosophy, it is said that every kingdom is essential. Every kingdom brings a new awakening of consciousness, a particular kind of consciousness. You can see that from the mineral to the plant kingdom, there is a difference in the consciousness there. The plant can respond in a far better way to the sun, to the rain, that the rock can. The rock can only respond to very strong temperatures or pressures. Then in the animal kingdom, we begin to see a kind of emotional response to life, which in plants, it's there but in germ. Then in the human kingdom, we develop what we call intelligence, this kind of self-conscious intelligence. Animals have an intelligence, but it's a more unconscious intelligence. We call it instinct. Although, of course, in pets and higher animals, they are already developing some degree of self-consciousness. So don't think necessarily of pets when we talk about the animal kingdom, but think of the whole animal kingdom, from insects and even lower up to the mammals. So the idea is that when we come to the human kingdom, there is the development of this self-conscious intelligence. There are some celestial beings that have not gone through all these kingdoms in the process of evolution. These are the 3 pre-mineral kingdoms that he's talking about, these elemental kingdoms. Elementals because their state of evolution is still very elemental, and also because they are the life, the energy, the consciousness behind the elements of nature. So there are these celestial beings which are, as he says here, irresponsible agents of the law. We could say that animals, again, not necessarily pets, but lower animals, are irresponsible. It's not that they can decide whether to kill a rabbit or not. They just act responding to the needs of the moment and acting with instinct, which is a kind of wisdom. Animals that act with instinct are far more harmonious with nature than we are. But that is because we are in the process of developing intelligence, and our intelligence is still, imperfect. But anyway, these elementals are celestial beings before going through the whole process of evolution, as we know it, from minerals to humans, before developing the human intelligence, and therefore are said to be semi-intelligent, irresponsible in the sense that they don't have a choice. They just instinctively express the laws of nature. But there are also beings that have gone in the process of evolution at some point through the human kingdom, and they have some kind of intelligence, a far wider and deeper intelligence that we human beings have, an intelligence that we cannot quite grasp. We normally tend to project the kind of intelligence we know onto angels or even God. We have to be always careful about this and realize that when we talk about the intelligence of angels, for example, it is an intelligence that is quite different from that of human beings. But it is the flowering of what we know as intelligence in the human kingdom. So there are celestial beings on the 2 sides of the evolutionary arc. If we are in the center, let's say, we have celestial beings coming into the human experience, and those are not intelligent, and then celestial beings that have gone through it, and then they are rulers, they are more intelligent forces in the universe. So he says, one of Madame Blavatsky's aims in presenting the Secret Doctrine, one of the best books, or the books in which Madame Blavatsky has expressed the Theosophical teachings in a deeper way, was to assign to man his rightful place in the scheme of the universe. When we understand the evolution of consciousness, we see that the man stage is the one in the total process in which spirit and matter are in equilibrium, a stage symbolized by the interlaced triangles of Solomon's seal, the one representing matter pointing downwards, the other representing spirit pointing upwards, the direction of future progress. So human beings in this view, every kingdom is important, and every kingdom is a turning point in some way or the other. The human kingdom is particular in the fact that both spirit and matter are in a state of equilibrium, in the sense of they are equally strong. In the case of an angel, for example, the spiritual aspect is stronger. Therefore, there is no conflict there. In the case of lower kingdoms of nature, the matter aspect is stronger, and therefore there is no conflict either. They are part of nature. It is in human beings where where spirit is awakened enough to oppose the tendencies of matter, and matter is strong enough to oppose the tendencies of the spirit. So we have this double triangle that he's talking about, the one that is present in the Theosophical seal, in which their spiritual tendencies are symbolized by the triangle going up, and the material tendencies are symbolized by the triangle going down. And out of this conflict between spirit and matter comes the perfect intelligence. It is in the struggle between the two that consciousness is purified. So in this sense, man occupies a central position in the cosmic evolutionary scheme. In him, the highest spirit and the lowest matter are joined by mind. The position of the human stage is clearly stated in a passage in the Secret Doctrine that says, the Secret Doctrine teaches that in order to become a divine, fully conscious God, even the highest, the spiritual primeval intelligence must pass through the human stage. And when we say human, this does not apply merely to our terrestrial humanity, but to the mortals that inhabit any world, that is, to those intelligences that have reached the appropriate equilibrium between matter and spirit. Each entity must have won for itself the right of becoming divine through self-experience. So human beings have this central position, which means human beings are neither the lowest nor the highest forms of expression. Many times our Western philosophies are quite anthropocentric, in the sense that they look at the world through human eyes, of course, and through what humans like, what humans want. And Theosophy also, to some extent, is put in that way because it is being taught to human beings. It's not being taught to animals or to angels. But the Theosophical teachings do not put the human being as the apex of evolution or as the lowest in the scale of evolution. in a whole cycle is more or less the central point, the turning point between matter and spirit. And this is why it is said that only in the human kingdom there is true conflict, conflict at a psychological level. Animals are one with nature, angels are one with nature. It is in the human being where we struggle to come from an unconscious unity into a conscious unity. And the quote goes on, "In sober truth, every so-called spirit is either a disembodied or a future man. As from the highest archangel," which in the Theosophical literature is normally called a Dhyan Chohan, this is a Sanskrit term. So from the highest archangel down to the last conscious builder, the inferior class of spiritual entities, these elementals we were talking about, all such are men having lived eons ago in other Manvantaras. Manvantara is an evolutionary cycle, on these or other spheres, and so the inferior semi-intelligent and non-intelligent elementals are all future men. The fact alone that a spirit is endowed with intelligence is a proof to the occultist that such a being must have been a man and acquire his knowledge and intelligence throughout the human cycle, in some previous evolutionary cycle. So this is more or less the idea that we have been discussing. So he says the three kingdoms preceding the human in the physical world are the mineral, plant, and animal. And similarly, there are three groups of post-human entities, these Dhyan Chohans. Dhyan comes from meditation. And Chohans means lords. So in a sense, you could say this is lords of meditation, which seems to be a strange name. But one of the reasons why they are called like this is because their state of consciousness is not so much a state of thinking consciousness as it is the one in human beings. It's a state that is closer to what we could experience in meditation. It is an intelligence that comes through direct perception, that comes through wisdom. So these are, in a sense, these celestial beings are lords of wisdom to more or less degree, to a greater or lesser degree, according to the stage of evolution. So he says that there are three groups of post-human entities, these Dhyan Chohans or Lords of Light, defined as the divine intelligences charged with the supervision of cosmos. So in the Theosophical view, we have some intelligences that have wisdom and therefore are, science sees that there is intelligence throughout the universe, that the cosmos works so well, that the qualities of matter and the nature of the forces in the universe are such that allow the cosmos to exist. They say if the magnitude of the forces of nature would change just a little, it would have been impossible to bring matter together and generate forms. Everything is very finely tuned, and then everything works with such a harmony. So they see that there is such an order, you could say intelligence in the cosmos. In the Theosophical view, all this intelligence that we see is the natural expression of these Dhyan Chohans. Now, we don't need to think that these Dhyan Chohans are like apart from the cosmos, because remember, we said these cells that have their own intelligence, they are part of our body, and our consciousness works through the body. So you can think of the cosmos as being the body of these intelligences. You don't need to bring the idea of dualism in the sense of angels that have nothing to do with matter and that they try to shape matter as an artist may try to shape a piece of clay, for example. there is something far more unitive in what the cosmos is. So these intelligences are shaping their own bodies, and we are cells within the bodies of these intelligences. Yes, we have a person that wants to contribute. Go ahead, Ed.
When you use the word intelligence, to me, that also implies sort of trying new stuff, making mistakes, creating things, sometimes very good, sometimes not so good. A certain ability to create, but not anything close to perfection. What do you have to say about that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Blavatsky talked about that. It seems that everything in nature is gradual, and there are some entities that have just, let's say, finished the human experience, and they are closer to the kind of intelligence that we know. And then there are entities that are far beyond the human experience, and so that intelligence has nothing to do with the kind of intelligence we know. Blavatsky says the lower intelligences, you could say that they could make a mistake. Of course, again in relative terms. She says, for example, that at some point in nature, different species could produce offspring. There was no genetic barrier between different species, and that brought certain problems in the process of evolution, especially in relationship to human beings. And then she says nature evolved, these intelligences changed some things so that there would be a barrier between species, and so that certain undesirable effects wouldn't happen any longer. I cannot go into the whole thing, it's quite complex. But she says this was like a mistake, in nature. But a mistake, again, she always tried to put all the forces in nature in a process of learning, in a process of evolving. And each one on its own level has its own kind of challenges. Now, that doesn't mean that these angels that are building the physical plane think in the way that we do. Blavatsky always says we just don't know what kind of consciousness that is. Just as an animal cannot quite know what it is to be a human being. So there is a certain room, especially with the celestial beings that are closer to the human kingdom, there seems to be some room to this process of learning their role in nature. But the further we go, the deeper these entities are united with the universal mind, with wisdom, and then we are further away from anything similar to what we call, a mistake or a choice, or I would say that generally speaking, we may regard the celestial beings and the intelligence of celestial beings as something that is beyond choices. We can see even this in our lives. We don't have to decide to choose for every single thing. We have to choose when we deal with something about which we are confused, about which we don't know. But the things that we know, we do spontaneously. So the celestial beings, I would say, are closer to this spontaneous right action that comes out of that wisdom. Let's see the contribution in the chat. Genetic barrier. That's interesting because one of the oldest stories, fairy tales, is called The Animal Bride, which later became The Beauty and the Beast. And you will find this is what Blavatsky always said. If you look into all these legends and mythologies, you will find all these kind of stories that, according to Blavatsky, they are the memory of things that really happened in the past, but that are are preserved in a symbolic way, in a way of a story or a myth, because they were transmitted orally and among people that didn't really understand what they meant, but they could be preserved in the form of a story. And even, she said, in the Secret Doctrine, the language there is also allegorical. We are talking about realities of things that we really don't know about. So even the language in the Secret Doctrine is allegorical. If we talk about the mistakes of the lower order of celestial beings, take it symbolically. Don't project your own idea of what a mistake is, what a decision is, onto these other kingdoms of nature. So that's very important to always keep in mind. So then he says, Madame Blavatsky points out that these different orders of celestial beings correspond to archangels recognized in the Roman Catholic system. Each of the three groups has its own particular place in the hierarchical structure and its particular function. Of the first group, it is taught that they build, or rather rebuild, every system after the night of the universe. In the Theosophical view, there is this cyclic model of the universe, in which the universe is manifested, it develops, and then it decays, just like our bodies, and then the universe is dissolved and comes back to a state of silent unity. That is like the night of the universe. There is a state of rest. And then that the universe reawakens and a new evolutionary cycle begins. So what Geoffrey Farthing is saying here is that the first order of celestial beings is the one that rebuild the system after these periods of rest, which in Sanskrit are called pralaya. Pralaya, pralaya. Then he says, the second group of builders is the architect of our planetary chain exclusively. So we have a set of, in the hierarchy of beings, a set of intelligences that rebuild the cosmos, then a set of intelligences that rebuild our planet, not only the physical planet, but also the subtle counterparts of our physical planet. Remember that in the Theosophical view, there are different dimensions or planes in the universe, and everything has these other aspects. And then he says, the third order of celestial beings, the progenitor of our humanity, or are the progenitor of our humanity, the macrocosmic prototype of the microcosm. This idea of macrocosmos and microcosms is what I said, that the human being is a reflection of the cosmos. So basically what he's talking about here, which is something that Blavatsky explained, there are these three levels of activity. There are a set of divine beings that have to do with the creation of the cosmos, another set that has to do with the creation of the planet, with the laws that have to do with the general evolution in the planet. And then there are the celestial beings that have to do with the evolution of human beings in particular. These are like the Elohim in the Bible. You know, in the Bible you have some Elohims that build the planet, that would be like the second order, and then you have Jehovah that created the human being, that would be the third order of builders. Actually, Blavatsky would many times say that Jehovah has different interpretations, but in its interpretation as the actual creator belongs to the lower orders of angels. So there is a question here: is it correct that it is saying that each of these beings were once a human being? Some of them, as we said, some beings, those who have a kind of independent intelligence, those who are rulers, yes, they went through the human experience in some evolutionary cycle. Those who are more like the active forces of nature that follow the plan that is found in the universal mind. These forces are still semi-intelligent. They don't have an independent intelligence, and these are spiritual entities that have not gone through the human kingdom. So we have both on both sides of the human journey, celestial entities. In the Theosophical view, evolution is in a U-shape, in a kind of U-shape. You start with spiritual entities that become more and more material and begin to acquire intelligence, and then life becomes again, or expresses itself again in spiritual entities, but now with intelligence. So he says, in the story of the formation and evolution of man as given in the Secret Doctrine, various terms are used for the categories of non-physical beings who take part in the process, some fulfilling a directive role, while others carry out the orders of their superiors. So sometimes you have the model of the architects, are those that have the plan for the evolution in their minds. Of course, we are talking in an allegorical way. Then you have the builders, that the builders follow the directions from the architect. And among the builders, you have different degrees also. You may have builders that have their own intelligence, or you may have pawns, let's say, that just follow whatever the boss said. So allegorically speaking, we have all these degree of intelligences. Now, all this, and now Geoffrey is quoting HPB, remember that all this variety are different expressions of one single being. Blavatsky said that to study the Secret Doctrine and the esoteric philosophy, it is very important to keep several ideas in mind always. The first one is that everything happens within the unity. All these are different expressions of the one being. And she says, the moment we forget that, the study loses its value. So she's quite radical in that. And she says, it's very easy to get lost in all this diversity and lose the idea of unity. But when you study without keeping the idea of unity behind, you will get the wrong idea. All ideas are limited, so the right idea is not even completely right. But if we keep the view of the unity behind, or as a background, then we will understand this as good as possible. So she says, all existence is one thing. The universe is a living entity composed of hosts of living beings. Again, refer to the idea of our body built on hierarchies of lives, cells with their own, or organs with their own intelligence. Today we know that the organs have some kind of memory, some kind of intelligence. Then you have cells. There is also a memory in the cells. Then you have molecules and atoms. So all these form part of what you call yourself, one being. Same with the cosmos. And she says, these hosts, which provide the structure, quality, and governance of the universe according to everlasting law, are divisible into 7 main types according to their characteristic qualities. These in turn having their correspondences at every level of being. We won't go in the idea of the correspondences. Although distinctively named and described in the literature, these various groups of living beings constitute a unity in which every component is intimately related to every other. So then he says there is another, so this is a first sense or a first idea of hierarchy, the idea of having different degrees of intelligence, but all of them composing one being. And then he says there is another sense in which the word hierarchy is used in occultism. In the formation of a cosmos, the first beings to be emanated from the logoic unity. In Theosophy, the idea of logos is similar to the idea of the divine, the God of the system, but only similar. The idea of the logos is normally far more abstract, and with this idea of the logoic consciousness permeating the whole system and not just being a God out there separate from you. So the first being to be emanated from the logoic unity are known as the seven supreme lords. You know, in the Bible you have these seven angels that are before the throne of God. The idea is that within this logoic consciousness, this one consciousness, there is a differentiation in seven different aspects, in seven rays of consciousness, let's say. You have the consciousness of the logos would be like the white light, and within that white light, there are the seven colors that we can identify. And within those seven colors, there are infinite colors. So something similar happens with consciousness. Each of these seven main rays of consciousness can be thought of as the head of a ray shining down through all the planes of being. All the beings along one predominant ray are sometimes referred to as a hierarchy. Each ray imparts the quality of its Lord to everything and being on all the levels. All things share these qualities or have them inherent in their natures, but not equally. One or more qualities predominate. So the idea here is that there are these rays of consciousness. Think allegorically in colors. So there are some beings that are formed within the yellow color. They may have different shapes, they may have the different ability to reflect that yellow. Some may reflect it in a very dull way, others may reflect it in a very bright way. And each one of these yellow entities also have the ability to reflect all the other colors, but filtered through the yellow color. So there is a yellowish green, a yellowish blue, a yellowish, every other color. So there is in nature, according to Blavatsky's view or teachings, there are in nature entities that belong to one particular ray of consciousness. So for example, there are entities that one of their main characteristics in one way or the other is what we could call willpower. And then these entities express particularly well things that are related to will or to power or to ruling or related to force. Even in a human being, you would see a religion based on this ray related to will would have methods that are based on what we call willpower. Then there may be another ray that is the manifestation of that is wisdom. So you would have some religions that don't use so much the willpower as a means to realize truth. They use more what we call wisdom. And you have within these rays, you have entities of all the kingdoms belonging to one ray or the other. So you may have human beings belonging to the first ray, to the second, to all the seven rays. You may have some animals belonging to the first ray or to the second or to the third. Even within the same species, you have plants also belonging to the different rays. So in this way, there is also a hierarchy of beings from that primordial celestial being that is the head of a ray, which passes through all the different planes, and different kingdoms and entities may belong to one ray or the other. So this is like the basic idea behind the seven rays of consciousness that you can see in esoteric philosophy. So he says each hierarchy is composed of those below it. This is important. He's saying each hierarchy is composed of those below it. So we could say our physical body is composed of the lives that are below us in this hierarchical way, is composed of the organs, and the organs are composed of cells, and the cells are composed of molecules, for example. So angels are composed of us or the planet. You know, the idea of the planet being a planetary spirit means that the whole planet is a physical body of this intelligence, and we, along with animals, plants, etc., are different kinds of cells or organs within this planetary spirit. So each hierarchy is composed of those below it, while in its turn it is a component of the one above it. There are therefore hierarchies of beings superior to men, from among whom came the guides and teachers of early races, and from whom also man has derived the very qualities of his being. These are also hierarchies, or there are also hierarchies of kingdoms below man, those of the elementals. The great religious traditions recognize these hosts under a variety of names: spirits, angels, and archangels, the Elohim and the Sephiroth, the Amshaspens, the Cosmocratores, and the Prajapatis, or of the different systems. So we have, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Greek philosophy, Hinduism. In the Secret Doctrine, they are generically known as the Dhyani Chohans, though also many other names are used to refer to these lofty powers, the designation of each often signifying the function of the particular order or hierarchy on its place in the total scheme. Thus we find Lipika, Ahid, mind-born sons of light, builders, planetary spirits, and so on. So all these are some of the different names that the hierarchies of being have in the Secret Doctrine. Blavatsky says somewhere that it is impossible to describe the whole hierarchy of beings, that would take however many books. And so what she tried to do is she talked about like 3 different kind of levels of hierarchies. These hierarchies are sevenfold. These sevenfold hierarchies are within 12 orders of beings. So these are like general groupings according to certain functions or qualities. We don't need to go into all the details. The main idea, especially in an introductory study in all this, is to begin to have a different conception of the universe. This conception in which nature is everywhere, in which we are far more and far less than we think we are. By that I mean my consciousness is not only mine, it's the result of my cells, and at the same time my consciousness is not only the result of my cells, it's the expression of the planetary spirit. So there are no real boundaries between, we have this sense of I am an individual isolated from the rest, and I can direct everything that I want. And we never have this view of if anything, we are a focal point of different rays of light that are coming and touching each other and producing a particular shade. And that is what we call myself. And everything else in the universe is like this. Everything is just a particular conjunction of different expression of the one being, because ultimately speaking, what we are is this one being and not any of the particular manifestations. We are the one being experiencing the universe as a human being. The same one being that we are is experiencing the universe as a plant, as an animal, as a celestial being, or as an elemental. So we can stop here. That's more or less part of what I wanted to share with you for this first class. And let's see if you have any questions or comments. If you want to use your mic, you can raise your hand, click on the icon that you have there on the top bar. Otherwise, you can type something in the chat box. Is there any question or comment about this? I saw that there was some problem with the internet. The recording, if you had some problem at some points, you can watch the recording too, and you will be able to see it. Yes, Ed, go ahead.
So I particularly like the emphasis. We're going to be talking about lots of different distinctions and experiences, but there really is no boundaries, even though we're defining these distinctions. I think that's a good way to remember the oneness while we're going through all these differences.
Yes, that is a very important point, and I think it's hard to take it in many cases, because most of our activity, psychological activity, consciously or unconsciously, is based on defining boundaries, saying, I am this, I am not that, this is myself, this is what I want, this is what I am. And the esoteric philosophy is constantly talking against it. The problem is that normally when we study these teachings, which are meant to produce a change in the way we see things, we tend to study them just as a concept, and we don't go deep enough to give us the opportunity to realize what this means. In Hinduism, there are these three levels of learning. They talk about, first there is the listening level, the level in which you incorporate the information. In ancient India, the only way you could learn about something was pretty much by a teacher telling you. Today, the listening part would include reading a book or different aspects. But that is what we are doing right now, getting in touch with a certain view. Then the second stage is the reflection, the pondering over. What is this? What does this mean? And trying to understand, even if still at the conceptual level, to make sure that you understand what the text is saying. One thing is to listen to it and then you finish and you forget everything. A different thing is you come back to the text and you ponder over and you try to get a clear image of what this is saying. And the third stage is meditation, meditating on the text, which implies a deeper effort to actually conceive life as the text is talking about. So we should make an effort in trying to see that what we were saying, that my consciousness is a result of all these different influences. I'm connected with everything around. I'm the result of the influence of the whole universe. And try to actually visualize it or understand it in a deeper way. If we make that effort, then the esoteric philosophy, or we can really begin to understand the esoteric philosophy as a direct perception. Understanding it at the conceptual level is only the first stage. So when we try to see the world in that way, it does change our paradigm as to what we understand we are. It's just like looking at a cloud. We see a very clearly defined outline, but the closer we get to the cloud, the less defined the outline is. So from afar, it seems that we are a clear entity. But when you start looking deeper and deeper, those limitations, those boundaries just dissolve, because as we are saying, we are a particular expression of the one in which everything is integrated. Any other comments or question? All right, so I'm going to send the link for the recording to everybody that signed up for the class. And thank you for participating, for being here with us. And I hope I'll see you next week. Have a great week. Bye-bye.